So I've got some thoughts. Surprise, surprise. I think that it's totally fair. I hate the prank phone call thing. There was at least five players, maybe even more, that went through the prank phone call. And so you say, why aren't the other guys doing it? Like, well, the other guys weren't stupid enough to film it and post it on social media. All right, guys, welcome back once again, White Widow Sports Podcast. I know it's been a couple of weeks. We've had a lot going on since the last time we put out a podcast. I do believe this is episode 14. Last one was 13. I think we double counted 12 of there at one point, but just don't count the podcast and you'll be fine. Obviously, we're not doing a good job of it either. But we've had a live stream. We've gone through an NFL draft. We put out a few different videos. So since our last podcast, guys, how's life been? What do you want to tell the people?
Chris, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Had fun with the draft. It would have been great to have 100 people in there watching with us, but think it's public knowledge that we had around 25. But like, if you think of it, if you had 25 people in your living room watching the draft with you, that's a great time. So I view it as that. So I appreciate everyone that did stop by, and a lot of you guys stopped by for like it wasn't for 5 minutes. A lot of you guys stopped by for several hours and just chatted us up, and that was pretty
Really
cool.
cool to
So
see.
good to have you guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the live stream was great. We had a couple of hiccups. Obviously, you're gonna have those on the first time you're doing something, but overall, I think it went really, really good. All the technical stuff kind of behaved. Once we finally got into it, uh, I like seeing the comments and you know shout out to Don for being super active in that, and Kyle as well. It's good to hear from both of you. Uh, we are moving up in subs right now. That's really, really good to see. So if you're not subbed, go ahead and hit that sub if you don't mind. And let's see that number shoot on up. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Draft is over. I'm kind of sad. That was a really, really good time. But I am looking forward to fantasy football, all the smack talking and the, games and really getting into it. So looking forward to that here in a couple of months. That life's good. Keep keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The draft was a good time. We've actually got a fantasy football draft. Chris and I do later on this afternoon. I think we're all looking forward to that as well. But yeah, before you know it, we'll be in training camp any day now. We might hear if Aaron Rodgers finally decides to sign a contract. So I know Brian is holding his breath, waiting for that one. So
Yeah.
you know, I'm hoping we've got a couple of fun, interesting announcements in the world of fantasy football for you guys coming forward. So stay tuned for that. But Chris, let's not keep the people waiting. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, the NBA playoffs is and the NHL playoffs are going on right now. Even though I have a team still alive as of this recording, things are changing tonight. I find myself enjoying the NBA playoffs a little bit more because I just prefer that sport. Over there, we got the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds in the East, all advancing. Not much trouble, not too much drama. West is a lot more fun. I expected the Rockets and Warriors to be fun, despite the two versus 7 seed difference. The Warriors have that championship pedigree, though, and you can't ignore that, even with the lower seed that they have. So that's been a lot of fun. Um, Before I move on to the next one, Brad, did you catch any of the Rockets Warriors? I assume you're probably of similar thinking. The Warriors got that championship mindset. You're not going to erase that just because their record doesn't match it.
Yeah, so I actually, believe it or not, seeds aside, I actually kind of favor the Warriors just as far as matchups and all
A
goes.
little bit,
The
yeah.
one thing that seems to be playing a role that I wasn't aware of, until very recently was that Steph Curry is dealing with a thumb injury that's
Oh,
apparently been affecting his shooting. And it's like you take shooting away from Steph Curry. I mean, that's like taking strength away from Superman. It's kind of his calling card. That's what he does. He's the greatest shooter in NBA history. And now it's coming out that they believe that the other team is purposely targeting that injured thumb, trying to
ooh.
hit it on his follow through and stuff like that. Maybe some dirty tactics. I don't know. We'll see. And before we go any further, I do want to say, uh, job well done to Coach Pop. I did see yesterday where he has
Yeah.
officially announced that he's stepping down as the head coach. Will
Hmm.
retain his team president status, which is I think is a good thing for the organization. but just an amazing career spanned, a few decades here, just done incredible work there for that team, giving them all kinds of stability,
All with one
produce some
team. Too.
superstars. Yeah, I mean, just what he's done for the length and tenure that he's had has just been so impressive. It's not something that you see replicated often, if ever. I mean, it's just kind of not the coaching culture that we see nowadays. So I did want to extend, our thoughts out to Coach Pop. I know he's had a lot of health issues lately, and maybe
Mhm.
he can move past that without the weight of the world on his shoulders as the head coach and president. So I hope he continues to do well and that team thrives, with him in that role. So that
Yeah,
was all I wanted to say on that.
if you're dealing with strokes, I guess minimize the stress. And being a coach of any sport carries a lot of stress. So another one I loved over in the West was the Timberwolves beating the Lakers. Ant Man, such a huge emerging star. It's great to see him and his boys get it done. I'm actually cheering for them the rest of the way, despite how unlikely that may be down at the sixth seed. But you never know. Um, I don't know that we mentioned it. I think the Rockets and Warriors, by the way, do have a game 7 coming up, and I believe that's today or tomorrow. I'm not sure. Um, Another series that's going to a game 7, Nuggets and Clippers. This one I actually didn't see coming. I really thought the Nuggets with Jokic were just a far superior team, but this is why they play the games.
Yeah, Nuggets in 5.
Yeah,
Apparently
yeah.
not.
No, apparently
Which,
not.
Brian, I mean,
Clippers.
you've been around sports for a long time. You've seen some Cinderella stories. You've seen some underdogs and everything. We talk about seeds and records and regular seasons, and it's kind of like forget all that you think that you know when it comes to playoffs. All you need is a ticket to the show, and once you're in there, it's a puncher's chance for anybody.
Absolutely. I mean, like Chris said, it's why you play the game. That's what we're all taught when we're little, from pee wee football all the way up to, high school, college, pros. I'm assuming I've never made it there, but, that's why you play the game. Anybody can win on any given night. So I usually shoot for like underdogs. I like them, kind of like this channel. It's kind of an underdog right now. Hopefully we'll rise to be a champion.
Yeah,
Certainly got
sure.
some title belts in view.
Yeah.
We know a thing or two about
So
championships.
yeah, but over in the NHL, we've got 2 game 7s coming up, including my Avs versus the Stars tonight, which has really put a lot of stress on me with being in the Eastern time zone, watching the games that start at 9:30, 10 o'clock. You're trying to wind down a little bit. I think you two both know that 10 o'clock is not really my winding down time, but I would like it to be, and this doesn't help when you're talking about hockey. It's a little unlike soccer because these scores can just happen at any time. You're skating around at 15, 20 miles an hour, I think, and like you could go from one end to the other, and the whole thing could just change with a blink of an eye. You often won't see it on the thing. You'll have to look at the crowd and the goals light up and everything. It just moves that fast, so it keeps you really on the edge of your seat. We also
You
got the
you might
Jets.
even force a game 7 on an own goal. I mean, that's pretty
I
crazy as
hope
well.
not. And watch this. This will go into overtime, and I'll be sweating. And it's gonna be a fun night. Actually, I mean,
Is that not how the Avs got to a game 7? Didn't their opponent score an own goal, or was that the other series?
I believe that was the other series. There's a lot. When you shoot it in, there's a lot of times that you can act like you have it saved, or it can bounce off one of your guys' skates and just go in. I mean, it's a little bit lucky, kind of like baseball. You swing a bat, and you might have had the perfect swing, but you never know where it's going to go. Really, sometimes with the slightest tweak. So a little
Man,
bit of
that
luck
sounds like
in
my
there.
golf game.
Yeah, that golf is another one too. You could hit something perfectly and it could sail right off into the trees, or it could go right where you wanted it to. A
I
little
think
bit of
Brian's
little
kidding
bit.
himself thinking that he has the perfect swing, though.
Yeah, I
Well, no, I
definitely.
mean, just I was just taking it as there's a little luck there sometimes. Like we've all, or I know me and Brad at least have heaved up a half court shot playing around with friends that's just gone in. We're like, yeah, that's what
That
I
was
meant to do.
skill, man. I just don't want to show off too much. So that's why I don't do it very often.
Yeah. Anyway, the Jets and the Blues have a game 7 coming up as well. Everyone else is advanced. Overall, if my team gets bounced tonight, I'm going to cheer against all Canadian teams because I know how much they hate that they have not won the Stanley Cup in 32 years. and I love that they hate that. So that's what I'm cheering for. Ultimately, in that scenario, I'd probably cheer for Carolina being so close to me, or the Panthers to repeat because they're an affiliate of the Ghost Pirates back here, my local minor league team. So yeah, for hockey, that's what I got. I'm having a lot of fun watching. Um, and I know you guys might have a little bit to say on this one. Move over to the MLB. The Braves are not cooked like we were worried about in a previous video. 14-17 isn't great, but it's trending towards middle of the pack. And by the end of the season, I could see this roster making the playoffs despite the horrible start. And I believe Brad threw out a stat that a team that started that way has never made the playoffs. I could see that happening right here.
Yeah, I mean, 14-17 doesn't sound like a good record, but when you figure that they started 0-7, that means they're 14-10 over their last 24 games. Granted, those first 7 games they do have to count. You don't get to just ignore them, but the trajectory is certainly changing.
Yeah, and it's a long baseball is a long season. I mean, we're a
Oh, yeah.
long way from October.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm happy to see it as a Braves fan. Hopefully it continues on. Obviously injuries play in any sport. Injuries play a lot into how your season's going to go. Uh, you know, Hopefully they'll continue being healthy and get some of their injured players even get them back on the right side of the roster. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm happy to see it as well.
Well, I think the biggest thing for Atlanta is it's a very similar story from what we've heard numerous times before. I mean, they are first, second, or third in a lot of major batting categories, especially since their first home game after they started off 0-7. Again, can't ignore those games. They did, in fact, happen. But once they got to Truist Park, I mean, just from that time until now, they have been on fire at the plate, but they're not winning every game because of pitching. And so it's one of those where what kind of magic can Alex Anthopoulos perform close to that trade deadline or preferably sooner as teams start to dwindle down and make certain players available for trades? What kind of deals can we get done to improve pitching, fortify that department? Because as of now, it just hasn't been it, and it's always seems to be the Achilles heel of the Braves since the '90s. I mean, once we started losing out on the Glavine, the Maddox, the Smoltz, and those great players retired, we'll get a couple of guys that we get excited about. Inevitably, they sign with other teams. Max Fried being gone. I mean, just you finally get an ace, and he's a homegrown talent, and then he chases money elsewhere, and your pitching suffers as a result. It sucks to see, but hopefully, we're not completely out of it. I would like to see the Braves make history, if for no other reason, to be the first team start 0-7 and make the playoffs. I
Yeah.
don't have a lot of delusions of grandeur at this point that they're a World Series team. But coming into this year, I think they had the second or third best odds to win the World Series. So maybe there was something to that line of thinking that we just haven't seen yet, but we
Maybe.
are on the up and up.
And I guess that's the nice thing about baseball is that you have 162 games, is it? I believe. Um, you can start 0-7. You start 0-7 in college football, you're going to be fired before the season's over. So baseball, you can afford that a little. But speaking of baseball, looks like the regular season for the SEC, at least, which is a great conference for baseball and a few other sports. Uh, that's gonna the regular season's gonna be ending here around May 20th with the start of the tournament. As of 4/27, meaning the new rankings are already out by I think tomorrow. But as it sits right now, we've got Texas, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt all in the hunt, hovering around the top 15, depending on the new rankings, which I do believe, if they come out once a week, should come out on the 4th. So maybe a little shakeups there, but we're talking about postseason starting. A lot of those teams are probably locked into a super regional or a regional rather. So that'll be fun to follow a little bit. Maybe I'll catch a few games. Look forward to college baseball a little more in the last few years. Personally, me and Brad both went to Georgia Southern. We even got to host a regional a few years ago, and that was a really big deal for Statesboro down there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those games that I find a lot more fun in person than on TV. I think it's a little easier to get submerged in the atmosphere.
Mhm.
Like you talk about people that go to WrestleMania and the Super Bowl and they go just to be there, but they can't even see what's going on because of how high their seats are. And you look
Mhm.
at some of that stuff and you're like, man, I would rather just watch that in my living room. I'm going to be more comfortable and I'm going to save a whole lot of money doing it. But these
Yeah.
college baseball games, they are a lot of fun to be there in person, especially when you get in that playoff atmosphere. And we always enjoyed going to Georgia Southern baseball games, despite being so heavily into football. It's like when baseball came around, it's like I'd much rather go to a baseball game than a basketball game. And we had a pretty decent basketball team at times as well. So
At
um,
times.
we had some exciting players come through that made it fun to go. But like I
Yes.
said, just atmosphere alone. I don't know if it's just because at one point in time I worked in a baseball stadium, and so I was a little bit more familiar with it. But had a good time, and I would always go back and do something like that again.
I think it was fun speaking from the college experience to really have nothing else that you had going on. And I forget if me and you went. I think we may have. I feel like uh, they had a lot of games that would be Saturday, football's done, basketball's done, all that stuff done. They'd have it like a Saturday or a Sunday at like 2 o'clock. And I was like, well, hell, I could go drink a couple beers and sit out there and enjoy myself. And they don't really, yeah, I don't know how it's changed a little bit. They don't monitor too much. You can sneak a little stuff into baseball games you couldn't into football games. So you could sit there and sip on a few drinks and enjoy yourself. And if you got tired and bored of it, maybe after 4 hours sometimes, then you could just easily up and leave, and people wouldn't like sneer at you as much as maybe leaving a football game early. They kind of got it. So, yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. And you're talking about 3,000 people at most, so you're not overwhelmed or blocked out by being in the nosebleeds. There are no nosebleeds, and I think that goes for a lot of the top college baseball programs. Like even when you have a real big one like Mississippi State or something, Stark Vegas. Um, I've never been there, but I can't imagine with whatever they have. And forgive me, state fans. I assume it's around 8 to 10,000. There's probably not a bad seat in the stadium for a huge team historically, at least in the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just want to mention softball real quick. It's really the last thing I have. Just like baseball, tournaments, conference tournaments are coming up soon around May 6th, so a lot sooner than that. As of 4/28, when they put out their last rankings, Oklahoma dominating at 42-5. Got Tennessee, Oregon, Texas A&M, Texas, Arkansas, Florida, so on, so on. They've all got great records. Can't promise I'll watch any of that, but I'll maybe flip open the ESPN app and see what's going on. If there's a really intriguing series for the championship, I have been known to throw on the softball championship just to see what's happening, especially if you got like a 11 to 13 game or something between two really big programs that haven't lost a lot. It's interesting to at least tune in for a little bit of that. So
Yeah, I tend to watch a lot of the College World Series games as we get closer to that time period. You start to see those favorites emerge, and you never know when you're going to see the next Paul Skeens or somebody like that just come through with this amazing performance, really rise their stock. It's very similar to what we saw with like Cam Scatterbo in the Arizona State Texas game. A star is born, and people that follow the sport that already knew what he was capable of doing were aware of it, and they were hoping for that performance. But then when you actually see it on that stage and you get to see so many more eyes on that, it's just really cool to see. So I'll be tuning into those late, college baseball games as we get to that time. So I tend to
Yep,
look forward to that more than anything.
I agree. I'm the same way.
it's pretty much all I had. I don't know if there's anything special going on in golf right now or anything else in the Major League Baseball ranks that
No,
we didn't really talk about. We kind of just hit the Braves and left, but it is what it is. It's
yeah,
our
not
I
channel.
do.
really. I don't think there's anything really big and exciting. Obviously the draft just happened. I do want to touch on the elephant in the room with Shador Sanders and not necessarily him falling to the fifth round. You know, I kind of hate to see it, but at the other side, I kind of understand
Kind
it.
of love to see it too.
Being a father and with Coach Prime and I was like that with my son. Obviously you want to be a part of it, but sometimes you need to learn how to step back and let your son's talent speak for itself. So I hate to see that, but really with the what I wanted to touch on was the whole because it does kind of touch on one of our local teams with the Falcons, is the whole prank calling and how big a deal that got just blown up. I mean, it's I think it's happened several times. It was never that big a deal. I guess it got blown up into a much bigger deal this time because he is so high profiled, and he did fall to the fifth round. You know, what do y'all think about the penalties that was levied against Atlanta, and do you think it's fair since it's happened to other teams in the past, and it didn't really make a big splash or impact? No teams have ever gotten fined for it that I know of, for letting, stuff leak like this instance. Do you think it's fair for the NFL to just really, not the Falcons, because 250,000, for the Falcons, probably not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but to that defensive coordinator, I do think he needed a penalty. I don't know, taking a good portion of his salary is kind of warranted. What are your y'all's thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know about the penalty itself, but the action itself, it's kind of mean. It's kind of funny. I see both sides of it. I'm sure I've done something on a very smaller scale like that before. When I don't know how old that kid was. He looks to be, I don't know, 16
20,
to 20.
21, I think. No, he's like
Yeah, okay,
21. He's in college.
early 20s. I mean, that's just kind of the douchey stuff you do in your early 20s. I did some douchey stuff, not on this grand of a scale. But if you told me that I could go in my dad's office and get Shador Sanders' number, like, I don't know that I wouldn't have considered, like, I might have considered doing something like that myself at that age. As far as the penalty goes, I feel like honestly the Falcons should have said, hey man, lock up your stuff a little better because this sort of thing happens. It puts a negative light on our organization, and maybe just leave it at that. Just be like, hey, we want to issue an apology. I don't know. So you're saying the NFL itself got involved, huh?
So I've got some thoughts. Surprise, surprise. I think that it's totally fair. I hate the prank phone call thing. There was at least 5 players, maybe even more, that went through the prank phone call. And so, you say, why aren't the other guys doing it? Like, well, the other guys weren't stupid enough to film it and post it on social media to get
That's a
caught.
good point.
So I mean, Tyler Warren was a high profile draft pick. He went 14th overall to the Colts. I think he got prank phone called around pick 7 with the Jets, or maybe it was 10th to Chicago. But these players, Shador Sanders wasn't the only one, but like you said, it was almost like kicking him while he was down, because they're calling him, saying, "Hey, you're next. We're about to draft you," and then they say, "Oh, just kidding." Like, that's the last thing he needs. These players, they
Right.
work really hard, say what you want about their families and stuff like that, but they work really hard to get to this. It is a goal that they are trying to achieve, and to make them think that that goal is becoming a reality and then really it's just a prank, I think it's stupid. So the
Yeah.
fact that you have somebody that got caught doing it, make them the example, make that the sacrificial lamb. The NFL had to step in because that NFLPA, that Players Association, is something they have to take very seriously. That connection with current and future players has to be taken seriously. There has to be a level of trust there where you have to say, like, hey, I'm giving you my information because it's part of the process. I want to be in the NFL, but maybe I don't want to be in the NFL if this is how you're going to treat your players and your prospects. So you make an example out of this kid. I hate to know what happened between that defensive coordinator and his son behind closed doors. I just
Yeah,
think he got $100,000 ass whooping is what I would have done if it was my
I
That's
kid
hope.
right.
that cost me 100K for a phone call. But I just think it's one of those things where you make an example of the one that was dumb enough to get caught, and hopefully that stops any future draft from being ruined in the similar sense where you have these dumb prank phone calls and stuff like that. I think you could see an increased security on these tablets and stuff that the NFL, I'm sure, is issuing. I doubt this is something that the Falcons had to buy or this defensive coordinator had to buy or anything like that. It was very much a not an Ulbrich thing, but an NFL thing of, hey, we're giving you this. It's going to have a passcode. This is the passcode. You don't tell anybody else what it is. Nobody else needs to have access to it but you. You are the defensive coordinator for the Falcons. not your 20-year-old son who goes to Ole Miss and decides to prank phone call Shador Sanders or anybody else. So that's my thoughts on it. I do think it's warranted. I think it's all fair. Do I hate it because it's a negative thing on the Falcons? Yes, I feel like we've had enough of that recently. With the Kirk Cousins tampering situation last year, cost us a 5th-round pick this year. But if it stops this from being an issue in forward and future drafts, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. Um, I'm like you. I hate it that it happened to the Falcons. I hate it that it happened to anybody. I agree. I think and I'm really surprised, with all the security, especially with the field that I work in on my day to day job. Security is very valuable. So I'm really really surprised there wasn't already measures in place to stop something like this. But again, you got to take control of your family. I mean, I couldn't imagine my kid coming in here and jumping on my laptop or, like my work issue laptop and getting information. I don't know. I agree with it. I hate it. I almost wish they'd have gone a little higher with it, maybe a couple of games suspension, for that defensive coordinator could have been warranted. I don't know about the $100,000. Yeah, that you want to sting their pocketbook, but you don't want to put anybody into financial despair either. Maybe if you cut that down to a $50,000 fine and a couple of games suspension, could have worked a little bit better. But yeah, they need to kind of chill out on that. And Brad mentioned it in a recent video we just did. The player that got drafted and immediately went to his mama's bedside before she passed away. I mean, just think about that. If they'd have pranked him, what would that have looked like? I mean, to me, that's where it really comes. You've got to stop the prank calls. You got to, I hate to say you got to teach your kid better because we've all done stupid things as kids. I did it myself, but it's that something's you got to put some more security, even if the NFL don't, maybe the 32 teams and really any major or professional sports needs to do this. And, I can see this falling over into the MLB, pro golfing, whether it be the Live Tour or PGA, hockey that we were just talking about, all of them. They you really need to start looking as we move forward into the digital age, move into the security of everything. So
Yeah,
that's
not,
really
not
what
to
I
go
Yep.
not to go way too deep on it, but Brian, you're a father, you're a provider. The lifestyle, the wants and needs of your children are provided by the job that you have. So
yes.
how many times have you said, "Hey, we've got to run into my office real quick," and you've got one of your sons with you, and you tell them, "Be on your best behavior, be nice to people, don't act out, don't be crazy. You cannot do anything that's going to hinder my job because that's what's paying our bills. That's what allows you to eat dinner tonight." You've had that conversation with your kids before. Not to say
Sure.
that your kids are bad or that you need to have that talk, but it's just a preliminary precautionary thing as dads. Okay. So when you've got Ulbrich, who's obviously a very successful coach, to reach the level that he has in the NFL, it's safe to say that his family is provided for. His son's college tuition is probably paid at Ole Miss by these coaching jobs with the Atlanta Falcons, with the New York Jets, so on and so forth. And so for his son to be able to come in and cost him not only $100,000, but what does this do for him moving forward in future job interviews? Is this something that's going to get brought up the next time
Sure.
he tries to get a promotion somewhere? It just puts a black eye on the Ulbrich name. And so, yeah, you could say suspension and money and all that stuff. But I think what that does is, like you said, $250,000 is a drop in the bucket to an NFL franchise. They're not really caring
Yeah.
about that money whatsoever. But 100K, some game misses, that black eye on the resume for a defensive coordinator does mean so much more because it's got to send a message to all these other kids, or coaches, I mean, to watch their kids, make sure that they're not having access to stuff that they don't need to, because the Atlanta Falcons aren't going to now say, "Hey, you cost us $250,000. Now we're going to have to implement a whole bunch of more security measures moving forward." But every other coach now has to look at that and say, well, I don't want to give up $100,000. I don't want to
Yeah.
miss a couple of games suspension. So now I'm going to take it upon myself to make sure this stuff is locked up. And I think that's why the ends justify the means with this punishment, because it does send a message to hopefully the kids, but also the coaches that are in possession of this information, and how sensitive it can be.
Yeah,
And also,
absolutely.
guys, consider FaceTiming the prospect. Like we have the technology now. You could see the guy's face on there and be like, "Oh, that is the GM. That is the owner." Like that is not a 20-year-old kid at Ole Miss. Like I'm skeptical on the phone half the time myself. So
Yeah, and maybe I'm a little bit ridiculous with this thought process, but I feel like this draft process is a sacred thing. I think it should be protected, and that's why anybody that tries to interfere with that, I feel like whatever they have coming to them is what they deserve. Like you mentioned with the Derek Harmon situation with his mom, and losing her the same night that he was drafted, stuff like that. Those are just incredible moments in sports and in life, and I don't want
Yeah,
stuff like that being tarnished because kids are doing something stupid. I mean, in a sense, it's bullying. There's just no place for it, and I don't want to see it continue. So
absolutely.
like, that turned into more of a conversation than maybe you intended it to or anything like that. But
But it's
maybe
it's
somebody wanted
good.
to know our thoughts. So
Yeah,
all
it's
good.
good for the, I think it's good for the channel. It's good to put out there, just if we do have some, usually our audience is in that 25 to 35-year range. So hopefully they have matured to the level that they're not going to do something like this. But maybe if a younger fan, watches this podcast, maybe it'll kind of give them some insight that's, not coming from one of their parents, but because none of us listen to our parents when we're younger. We all think we already know it all, but get some insights from other people that say, hey, that's not the right thing to do. Bullying is never the way to go. And I'd like to say we live in a life where we didn't see that anymore, but I just, it's going to happen. We just need to squash it as quickly as we can.
yeah, and I know
But
we've got a teenager. So shout out to Brandon, the Kendrick Lamar fan from the Super Bowl. If you remember, he's actually very close to graduating high school. So congratulations, Brandon. We're proud of you for that. But I know he watches every episode beginning to end. We certainly appreciate that. But I feel like if he ever did anything this stupid, I would wring his neck personally. So
yeah,
there is youth of America tuning into this, and so hopefully they can take something from it and say, "Hey, maybe I will think before I do something like that," just because you never know who it's going to affect and the consequences
sure.
that come from that. But the people like you mentioned that are older in that 35 range, say they had a kid at 21, 22, they are now raising that next generation of teenager that's coming up and will pretty soon be in high school, in college, and capable of doing the same thing. And so now it's just to say, like, hey, maybe I'll have that conversation with my son because they're old enough to know there are consequences to your decisions and to your actions, and have that before it becomes an issue, have that conversation. So
Yep.
Mhm.
maybe worthwhile, who knows.
Good thoughts.
Good thoughts.
But yeah, I think that's really all we had this week. Episode 14 in the books. We'll try to be a little bit more regular. We had a lot going on with the draft, and that certainly took a lot of our time, but it was something that we thought was worth doing. And I hope anybody that tuned in for that draft enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments, what's something that you wanted us to talk about, but didn't. Maybe we can touch on it next time. Let us know what you've been thinking about a lot of the different side content that's come out. We've had some pretty good numbers coming out on that. Got more coming. I think we've got another video coming out today, or what will be yesterday as the time that you watch this. So if you
Mhm.
haven't watched the least impressive and most impressive NBA champion videos, check those out. They will be available to you now. But also let us know when something that you would like us to go live for next time. We
Sure.
do want to do another live stream. We need to know what you would want us to go live for and what you want that to be centered around. We're open to suggestions on that. But guys, say bye to the people and have a good week.
Yep. Have a good week.
Go Avs.
So,